In 1966, the North Korean soccer team completed a stunning upset of Italy in the World Cup that year. First, they were treated as heroes, but were they actually sent to the North Korean gulags as punishment for their play in the rest of the tournament? The 1966 World Cup was held in England from July 11th to July 30th. It was an interesting geopolitical tournament even before the teams took the pitch. For one, North Korea was the only Asian country to participate. The Korean War was still fresh in the minds of many of the participants. England even protested the inclusion of the North Korean team because they were allied with South Korea in the conflict. The UK did not recognize the legitimacy of North Korea from a diplomatic sense. They also felt their inclusion in the World Cup would further strain relations between the United States, the United Kingdom, and South Korea. Additionally, there was a controversial decision to include African nation tournament winners, as they would play the Asian tournament winners for a spot in the actual World Cup tournament. The African teams felt a win in their own tournament would merit inclusion in the World Cup without having to play the Asian teams. The CAF, or Confederation of African Football, boycotted the World Cup to protest the lack of direct representation of any African squads. FIFA ended up fining the CAF 5,000 Swiss francs for their boycott. Yin Nen Kat Chu Tesama, who was president of the CAF, stated, quote, "FIFA has adopted a relentless attitude against the African associations, and its decisions resemble methods of intimidation and repression designed to discourage any further impulse of a similar nature. In our opinion, the African national associations really deserved a gesture of respect rather than a fine." End quote. Now back to North Korea. Even though they had qualified for the tournament, they were by no means a favorite, let alone in the same class as the top teams in the world such as England, West Germany, Portugal, and Italy. The North Koreans were put in Group 4 with Bulgaria, Mexico, and Switzerland. Their first match against the Soviet Union did not go as planned, as they were dominated 3-0. However, they pulled it together and scraped a 1-1 draw with Chile, scoring in the 88th minute to tie the game. Many felt that North Korea would be eliminated when they faced Italy on July 12, 1966. The Italian national team was considered a cup favorite and one of the best in the world. North Korea scored in the first half and miraculously held their lead, winning 1-0 and eliminating the Italians. The BBC commentators at the time said after Italy's massive loss, quote, "The fall of the Roman Empire had nothing on this," end quote. Due to the shocking upset, the North Korean team celebrated for a couple days. Their next test would come up against Portugal, another World Cup powerhouse. Again, the North Koreans took it to one of the world's best, jumping out to a 3-0 lead. A lead of this magnitude in soccer is almost insurmountable. The Portuguese stormed back and scored 5 unanswered goals, eliminating North Korea from the tournament. Surprisingly, many fans in England were behind the North Korean teams as a Cinderella underdog story. Unsurprisingly, the North Korean regime was not pleased with the performance of their team after blowing a seemingly insurmountable lead. In the end, England would go on to win the World Cup. However, the North Koreans would not meet a hero's reception upon return. According to Kang Chol-hwan in his book The Aquariums of Pyongyang, the journalist and North Korean defector claims members of the team were sent to the Yodak Gulag, where him and his family were imprisoned. One of the team's best players, Pak Sung-jin, who had scored 2 goals against Chile and Portugal, was allegedly imprisoned while Chol-hwan was at Yodak. Pak was the first Asian player to score a World Cup goal. Kang Chol-hwan states in his book that, quote, "The team's antics were judged bourgeoisie, reactionary, and corrupted by imperialism and bad ideas." This was according to the regime of North Korea. In reality, the celebrations were just an outlet after one of the biggest upsets in World Cup history. It was claimed that they were hungover during the game against Portugal, and therefore they lost due to their imperialistic and bourgeois celebrations. Pak, who denied that he was even part of the post-game celebrations, is said to be one of the most athletic but loathed prisoners in the camp. He was allegedly nicknamed the Cockroach for how he would eat as many bugs as he could find. It is believed that he spent over 20 years in the camp. Pak Pak was also able to endure several intense torture sessions. One of the harshest punishments at Yodok was the sweat box. The sweat box was a dark, locked shack with little room to maneuver. It was up to the guard's discretion as to when to let you use the bathroom or to help you when you were sick. Pak is said to have done a 3-month stint in the box at one point. Chol-hwan stated that Pak was still in the camp when he was released in 1987. There is controversy, however, surrounding the stories of the North Korean soccer team and Pak's treatment. In a documentary called The Game of Their Lives, Pak claims himself that he was never sent to the gulags. BBC filmmaker Daniel Gordon stated the whole story was concocted as Cold War propaganda. The remaining players stated they were welcomed home as heroes and lived comfortably in Pyongyang the rest of their lives. During the documentary, Pak vociferously defended the North Korean regime. He also stated, quote, "Before we left for England, the great leader had asked us to win 1 or 2 games," end quote. During the filming of the documentary, Pak was allowed to show off his 2-story apartment, brimming with soccer memorabilia. Additionally, Pak's son was a soccer coach as well. For the filming of the documentary, 7 of the 11 members of the team were found. The documentary itself was also sanctioned by Pyongyang. It's one of those cases where an iron-fisted regime is going to control as much information as possible. Additionally, Pak and the other players would dare not speak out against the regime in order to receive further pain and suffering. While we may never actually know for sure if these players were sent to the gulags for their actions after beating Italy, it is an interesting tale in the war for information and propaganda. Regardless, Chol-hwan's book, The Aquariums of Pyongyang, gives an in-depth look into the horrors and challenges of living under a harsh authoritarian regime, and is well worth a read to consider the lessons from history that sadly repeat themselves time after time.